Yeah.
Oh, that's tremendous content.
Welcome to the Putback presented by 888 Sport. Bet $20 on either the Knicks or the Nets and get $88 in free bets by using the promo code SNY88. I'm Ian Begley here with Chris Williamson. Chris, what do we have for the baseline this week?
Well, Ian, you knew that the Knicks' winning streak was eventually going to come to an end, and it falls at the hands of the Phoenix Suns, one of the best teams in the NBA. But the confidence is still high with this Knicks team. It's really important to be playing high-level basketball at this time of the season, especially considering the Knicks have a brutal schedule to end the year.
Yeah, Derrick Rose pointed that out after the loss to Phoenix on Monday. He said that, listen, we're playing really well at this point. That's what you want to be doing. And he said you just have to kind of turn the page on a loss like Monday's to Phoenix, where the Knicks had a chance to win that game and Chris Paul was a magician down the stretch. But you look ahead here, Chris, and the Knicks' schedule is really tough. According to tankathon.com, the Knicks have the sixth most difficult schedule left these last 10 games. And you look at the Eastern Conference standings, they have the toughest schedule among all East teams that are in playoff contention. So you look at Boston, you look at Atlanta, they're right behind the Knicks entering play Tuesday. And the Knicks don't want to fall behind into seventh place because that gets them into the play-in tournament. So it's going to be tough for them to remain among the top six in the East because Atlanta and Boston, according to tankathon.com, have among the 10 easiest remaining schedules in the NBA. So tough sledding here for the Knicks. They have a 6-game West Coast trip coming up. You get Houston, you get Chicago on Wednesday night. You know, those are winnable games. Other than that, they're going to be tough contests for the Knicks. And one other note here, Chris, the Knicks have been making some transactions at the end of the roster, converting Jared Harper to a 10-day and then cycling through some players into that two-way spot. And what they're doing here is they're trying to reward some of the players that played for the Westchester Knicks in the G League bubble, rewarding them financially for doing that. And I think you may see another move or two here before the end of the year where the Knicks continue to add compensation to those G League players.
This week's guest is one of the best at breaking down the game. Nekias Duncan, a writer for basketballnews.com and co-host of the Dunker Spot podcast.
Elfrid's an important part of the team. He's, you're not going to play great in every game. There's a lot of things that he does for the team that probably goes unnoticed.
All right, Nekias, so from your perspective and what analysis and expertise you have, give me a case for, playing Elfrid more than Knicks fans probably like.
I think he is another guard that can give you some of the rim pressure that you want. There's a similar element to Derrick Rose there. Ultimately, just from what I've seen, I don't think Elfrid's the best point guard in the guard room. I think Knicks fans would agree with that as well. But since you are toggling three guards, two vets and a rookie that is playing well, I think it makes sense to kind of have a guy like Elfrid with the starters. He's not good enough to carry a bench for you. So if you surround him with better talent, maybe he's an innings eater of sorts to where he can give you that dynamic offensively. He has a little bit more size defensively. I think he's currently the best defender out of those three guards. So maybe he's a guy that can kind of help on that end. So you kind of do that. And then once you have that second unit coming in with Rose and Emmanuel quickly, if you have that dynamic off the bench, you can kind of erase whatever shortcomings that Elfrid brings with the starters.
Guys, I think that, you're alluding to it. If you're not starting Elfrid Payton, then you maybe are hurting the chemistry of the bench unit. You talked about Rose quickly there. But if you were Tom Thibodeau and you said, all right, I can't start Elfrid, where would you go? Would you go quickly? Would you go Rose? And would you have concerns about how that could impact the way the overall group has been playing?
Honestly, if you're not starting Payton and kind of surrounding him with that talent, I don't think you can play him. If you don't start Payton, I think I would start quickly. I think the pull-up shooting that he provides in pick and roll is important. The floater game is important. Just his ability to space the floor helps. And Derrick Rose is a guy that needs the ball in his hands. Doesn't provide that kind of off-ball value, but he is a guy that can drive your bench unit. He's done that for New York. He's done it in Detroit, did it in Detroit last year. He gives you that spark and kind of that know-how to, can carry your team for an 8-minute stretch when your stars are sitting. So I think that's the way you kind of, that's the way you split it. You don't give Emmanuel quickly a bunch of on-ball reps with the starting unit. That the offense is still going to run through Julius Randle, still going to run through RJ Barrett. And with quickly not being your typical break-up-down type guy, if he's able to attack scrambling defenses, playing off of those two guys, I think that makes it easier for him, and the shooting helps everyone.
A Nick Twitter favorite is Frank Ntilikina You either love him or you hate him. There's no in between. If you're taking Payton out of the lineup, are you putting Ntilikina in your rotation, or are you putting Kevin Knox in your rotation?
I personally have an affinity for Ntilikina, so like I would like to see it. Him and Rose playing together might not be great. Like you need one of those two guys to shoot. And like Frank Ntilikina has been fine in the corners from what I've seen, but like other than that, teams still don't really guard him as a spacer. But I think just in terms of the skill set he provides, is still a ridiculous defender in my opinion. And if the corner shot is falling, like I think there's some utility for him. I just think with the guard room getting a little bit deeper and the Knicks being where they are in the playoff race, I don't think they can kind of afford to tinker with things that way.
Just a quick note on Ntilikina's future. I do know that there was opportunities earlier in the season to move him, but there were people in the organization opposed to making deals at that time. Now, obviously, he's going to be a restricted free agent. Don't know exactly what's going to happen there, but there was some pushback against different trade opportunities that came up with Ntilikina.
Twitter is better than going to the club. I'm watching the History Channel in the club, and I'm wondering, how do these people know what's going on the Sun? Ain't nobody ever been. Nekias, what surprised you the most when we talk about Julius Randle and the dramatic turnaround that he has had this season?
I think it just starts with the jumper. Like I think that has opened up so many things for him. You know what he brings as a driver. You know what he brings as a postal threat, as a guy that can just bully people. Now that he has a legitimate jumper, it just makes the driving game and the downhill game so much easier for him. And once he's able to get downhill with teams cheating up a little bit more on the perimeter, he gets downhill, he's drawing more attention. Now the passing gets to shine through a little bit more than it did last year. So I think it starts there. I was one of the people that were pretty vocal about, hey, this is a great start for him. I don't think this is sustainable because he's gone from a middling shooter to like a 40% guy from three. And there's going to be some drop off at some point. And we are now in April and there hasn't been a real jump off. So this may just be a real leap for him. And if this is a real leap for him, he's a legitimate number one option.
Number one, so you think he can be a Batman type of guy? I mean, obviously on this team, he is number one. But, you know, for them to get to the championship, you know, to really do something great, you think he could be a number one guy?
Like, I think he's trending up that way. I mean, just having a guy at the 4 spot that can put that kind of pressure on the rim and also shoot, there are only a handful of guys in the league that can do that. And once you add in the passing ability as well, it's not like he's a black hole of sorts. He is a guy that can make things better. And, you know, the Knicks offense as a whole hasn't been very good. That's just a product of the personnel that they have, but they are maximized with Randle on the floor just because he can slice you up in a bunch of different ways. As the talent level rises, I feel like there's still low-hanging fruit for him. Like I think if you put more spacing around him, what does he look like? Like if he's putting this up in an offense that doesn't shoot many threes and doesn't have a lot of like movement shooters, like Reggie Bullock is basically your movement shooter, and you have some fine spot up shooters around the margins there. But if you space the floor for him, if you have a true like pick and roll threat at point guard spot, like
that's one of the interesting questions to me too with this Knicks team is like, okay, you're gonna add another quote unquote star. Do you bring in a player who needs the ball in a way that takes the ball out of Julius Randle's hands as a playmaker? Because it's worked so well for you this year. And if you do, how do you balance that while keeping Randle as effective as he's been? Is that even possible? Or do you not do that at all and do you just look to complement Randle? It's going to be fascinating to see how they approach that, particularly this offseason.
Looking at your phone after being away from it for 2 hours and no text or nothing is a tough feeling, man. LOL, it hurts. I'm in the house drinking strawberry lemonade smoothies like a loser.
Whether it's fair or not, or accurate or not, Tom Thibodeau came to New York with this reputation of a hard-driving coach, wears players out. Some players don't like playing for him. And obviously this season, we haven't seen that from Thibodeau's Knicks. But Nekias, what about this season for Thibodeau in New York has surprised you, if anything?
You're always going to get at least a year one bump from Tibbs, right? Like, he is a culture setter to the truest sense of the word. Like, he's going to establish what they want to do defensively. There's a baseline of effort and energy that he requires. There's a level of detail that he requires on both ends of the floor. And I think that's helpful for a young team like this Knicks squad. So the job he's been able to do, like to get Julius Randle to step up defensively, to get RJ Barrett, who has quietly turned himself into firmly a good defender this year in year two. And that just wasn't really on the scouting report for him coming into the league. Like, I think that's a testament to Tibbs' defensive acumen, even going to the front court, like Mitchell Robinson. Some of it is just natural progression, but also like the fouls were just completely cut down for him this year. And that was a huge development for him. Even a guy like Nerlens Noel, who is notorious for blocking a lot of shots and also taking himself out of a lot of plays because he's hunting for shots to block. We haven't seen that much of that this year. So I think he just has a way of teaching defense and drilling principles. I mean, it just works for a young team like this. So I've been impressed with that aspect of it. The offense, I mentioned this on the Dunker Spot podcast with Steve Jones. Like, they just play hard on offense. And that's a super cliche thing to say, but like, you watch teams in the league and maybe it's, a double screen in early transition or something like that, to where you see what teams are doing, but like the screens aren't really being set. Or if it's a screen that, if it's like a decoy or something like that, these guys are running like 70% because they aren't a part of real action. For the Knicks, everything is run hard. And that's such low-hanging fruit in the regular season, to be able to just get as much as you can out of everything. And again, the offense in a vacuum isn't that good, but it could be a lot worse with the talent that they have, and they're kind of maximizing what they have. And I think that's a testament to what Tibbs is doing.
That's it for this episode of the Putback, presented by 888 Sport. For Nekias and Chris, I'm Ian. We'll see you next week, everybody.
So who do you think is the Knicks' best piece to build around? That's the subject of this week's SNY Fan Choice, presented by 888 Sport. Bet $20 on the Knicks or Nets and get $88 in free bets with promo code SNY88.